Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum for the month of October. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Ashley Green, who is a pillar in the inclusion and wellbeing community of the UAE and beyond, and we're really lucky to have you. As always, we will record the forum. We will make all the recordings available on our YouTube channel, which are free to access for anybody. And we've got loads of videos up there from wonderful experts like Ashley in every kind of field for inclusion and well-being. Please, can you keep your mics muted to ensure that our speaker can be heard? If you have a question, you can write it in the chat, or you can put your hand up and we can certainly address them for you. We keep our discussions focused on practice, and we don't like to discuss individual schools, centres, or individual clients. If you are representing an industry sector, please feel free to contribute, but we don't promote any goods or services or products on the forum. So without further ado, I shall hand over to the wonderful Ashley.
Thanks so much. Just give me a wee second to make sure to share my screen properly. Can you see it yet?
Yes, perfect.
You can see my screen, great. Okay. So first of all, thanks so much for that lovely introduction. You just do so much for the community, and it's so nice to be part of the involved with inclusion and all the wonderful things that you do. So I'm very grateful for the chance to be here and speak to you all. So thank you very much. I work now for a company called the Free Spirit Collective. And what I want to do is just chat a little bit about myself, what you might get from today. And then, although I will talk a bit about the company, but the idea is more so that you can see some of the things that we do, but also adaptations you can make for your own context, whether it be in school, within the counselling department, within wellbeing champions and things like this. So my name is Ashley Green and I am a former teacher, and this is the first time I've actually said that since I've left teaching. So I'll just put this up here for a wee second so you can see the screen. So I've worked in the region now for 12 years. This is my 13th year. 12 of the years were in primary education. I've worked in the both profit making and non-profit sectors, so I understand the nuances and differences between them. And on social media, I'm Mindfulness Green, and this was a name given to me by the children. That's years ago, just because I really wanted to introduce mindfulness practice, meditation practices and little things that started just in my own classroom. So that's a place where I tend to share a lot of things. And like we mentioned before, I'm an enthusiast when it comes to well-being, because I just, like you all, will believe the power and wellbeing provision and how that can support our communities and be inclusive of everyone in the community, not just those in crisis or, there sometimes can be a group overlooked within sectors. So wellbeing belongs to everyone, and it should be shared in a way that everyone within the community, including parents and staff, can access that. I'm also a positive psychology practitioner and wellbeing coach. I did my master's degree in this, and again I had this moment of this needs to be in schools. I know that within counselling teams and inclusion departments there are amazing things happening within the region, but again, to me, I feel like also wellbeing provision, like I said, should encompass everyone, and there should definitely be more explicit teaching as well as the implicit that staff are trying to get day to day throughout their normal lessons. And also I'm a podcaster, a wellbeing podcaster, and it's called The Diary of an Ex-Teacher. So if you're interested in listening to more wellbeing concepts, I talk about a different one every week. So we'll talk about imposter syndrome that people might experience as a staff member within school, just different aspects. But there's every episode, there's tips to help improve your own well-being, because that's obviously where we begin as ourselves before we can impact the children and the community as effectively as we wish to. Oops. So what might you get from today? Now, I've tried to not repeat what I talked about the last time when I was here. I think it was 2020 or 2021 that I did a chat here as well. So I want to kind of touch base on just some of the things that we talked about before. I want to talk a little bit about positive psychology and education. And then, like I mentioned, the Free Spirit Collective and the things that we do. But again, you will recognize that the things that are offering are probably things that are already happening within your school in terms of wellbeing departments. And it might also spur on some ideas and different groups that you can run within the school for staff and students. So one of the things that I talked about, now this research was my master's research, but before the pandemic, but it was into thriving teachers, which is actually interesting to think about now post-pandemic. Well, we're almost out the other side, and how much research has even come from the last couple of years in terms of mental health provision, wellbeing provision. But these are the themes pre-COVID that the thriving teachers, they were most apparent. So these teachers had kind of intrinsic commonalities. They were aware of their own well-being and self-care. They really were able to talk about that, and they wanted to make changes to that, different things they do to improve. It was something that was in the front of their psyche. They were aware of how to improve their own well-being. They were also reflective practitioners, which we all talk about, and we know the phrase from our studies and things, and we reflect on our work day to day, or you do within the schools. But again, this was something that they were reflective about. Seemed to be a common trait between the teachers that were interviewed. And also they had solution-focused attitudes. So sometimes it can be really easy within a school environment to think about the hard parts of it. You know, it can be stressful and things can go wrong, but also thinking about this is interesting to think of a solution-focused attitude. So they often would look for solutions to difficulties and stressors for themselves and for the children. Also, we know the importance of relationships in education. Children learn, and the research talks about how children learn well with people that they like. Just as simple as that, people that they enjoy learning from and they have a trusting relationship with, and they feel respected and they feel heard. But when it came to the thriving teachers, they talked about how they had a lot of importance on social aspects of life in the workplace and also out with the workplace. And they valued mutual respect between themselves and students, between themselves and leaders, between themselves and colleagues. And one of the other interesting subordinate themes there was they were giving to other people, giving of their time, giving of their support. It seemed to be something that they referenced quite a lot. And also the effects of leadership. It's an important one because I'm sure we've got leaders within participants here. And these teachers that told me they were thriving, they felt empowered by their leaders. They felt an openness and approachability. If they had anything that they wanted to try and implement, for example, within wellbeing or inclusion departments, SEN departments, different things, then they felt like they could do that and they would be heard. And there was also this element of equality within the departments, that they felt that leadership treated everyone with equity, I suppose, in the way that they can access the resources to their job and do their job to the best of their ability. And then also the last one was the working environment. So it's something that I always think is important to just take a moment when I see this one. And although our initial reaction is to say that we feel, you know, trusted and safe within work and supported, but it's to take stock and feel, you know, yourself within your own environment. And do you have that feeling of trust? Do you feel psychologically safe within your work? And are you supported? So these thriving teachers felt all of those things. But again, it was interesting for me to sit and think about, okay, if I feel this one, why? And if I don't feel like that, then why not? And what can I offer as a solution for myself and perhaps to leaders or anything to try and improve that for myself and others? So it was just a really interesting thing that I wanted to revisit, just to remind everyone, if you haven't seen it already, some of the themes here when considering your own well-being within an educational environment. Oops. And again, these are the well-being reminders for you. So I haven't spent too long and too much detail, but I think from a previous presentation, I don't know if it's saved somewhere or it was maybe sent out, Catherine, it probably was. So all of the book recommendations and all of that will be there.
Yeah, they're all on the YouTube channel. So all the forums have been recorded for the last, gosh, over 2 years. And
Fab.
they're all now on our YouTube channel, so you can find them.
And that's such a useful resource. And I think the other thing about that is as well, I can send you this presentation, but also again, the link, I can share that again with everyone that's here today. And in that one, there's also the video book recommendations for each area. But these are some of the wellbeing reminders that I wanted to share with everyone, because I know from speaking to colleagues and things that are ex-colleagues and friends within Dubai, inspection especially is starting to be reintroduced this year. And of course, wellbeing's high on the agenda, as is inclusion, as it should be within education. And it's just really useful then to consider some of these when you're coming up to that time within your school, but also for yourself, personally and professionally. To me, throughout the research that I've done over time, these are the themes that are probably the most robust and widely researched. And again, they kind of pop up through different wellbeing curriculums globally. And I just wanted to chat a little bit briefly about these as reminders for people to take stock of these things, however that works for you, whether it's at a certain time in the evening to sit, or in the morning, sit and think about, how do I feel today? Check in with yourself. And it sounds like the simplest thing, but sometimes that's something that we just don't make the time for. And actually sitting with emotions and feelings and figuring out what's there and why it's there can also help improve our emotional intelligence when it comes to other people. So of course, the children in your class or that you work with, you're hyper aware of their actions and how they feel day to day, but then it's encouraging them to be able to have this open dialogue and it not be you know, to make it a safe space to just talk about how they feel. And we can't do that as effectively, I don't feel, as if we're not able to do that for ourselves. And that starts with listening to ourselves, asking ourselves, how do we feel today? There's a really lovely poem by Rumi called The Guest House. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but that's a really lovely short poem thinking about how to mindfully check in with your emotions. And it talks about whatever comes, whatever knocks at the door, welcome it in, have tea with it, sit with it for a while, and then gently usher it out when it's time. And, you know, it might be clearing you out for something better. So it's a really lovely poem when considering thinking about your feelings and emotions. But again, think about you at your optimal self if you're checking in. And it doesn't mean that you have to have those positive emotions all the time, but it's also being really aware of the power and the negative emotions, so to speak, you know, and then you can really appreciate the joyful times when you acknowledge the times that are a bit harder. So it's just emotions and feelings are always a starting point for me. Character strengths is something else. I think I talked about this the last time as well. If you haven't already, the VIA character website has a free survey that you can go on and use. You can also use this for children. So once you are aware of your own order of character strengths, so there's 24 strengths that every human has to varying degrees. When you complete the free survey, it orders them from 1 to 24. And this was a big 3-year scientific research project where I think there was 55 scientists headed by Professor Martin Seligman, who's one of the founding fathers of positive psychology. And they created this categorization of strengths, because when you look at psychology, particularly historically, it really focuses on what's wrong with us and the things that can go wrong and what we can be diagnosed with and how to fix it and things like this. So these scientists thought, well, there's also a lot right with humans and there can be so much to do with flourishing. So character strengths was almost a categorization of that. And I could talk about this for hours and hours, but the thing about character strengths for me is when you consider your own strengths and you think about them in a professional context, in a personal context, and how you can apply them, day to day in different scenarios, and it can like bolster and boost your own subjective well-being. But again, if you think about this in a school community, because there's youth surveys there for adolescents and also for children, and of course parents can do this as well. If the whole community are speaking the same strengths language, and it can be included in individual learning plans, it can be included in parent-teacher meetings, you know, when you talk about the different strengths, out with skills and talents. These are core strengths of who we are as human beings and how you can apply them. So for example, if a child really demonstrates the strength of leadership, how lovely that you can spot that in them, you can talk to them about that and how they can share that with other people. I hope the traffic isn't too noisy out there, sorry, it's like Marina. So also gratitude is another one, and again, at face value, when we see this word, we do often feel like it's sometimes kind of watered down and diluted, and we come across this in the term mindfulness when you think about mindfulness, you know, like the restaurant McDonald's, it's just oversaturated and it's everywhere, and what does it actually mean? But gratitude is definitely one of the ones that's probably most widely researched. There's so many research papers within all the different industries, particularly within education, talking about the power of it. And there's so much to do in terms of intrinsic gratitude or learned gratitude and improving it. So for yourself, there's so many interventions that you can do. And I know many people probably do things like this anyway, because like I say, it's definitely growing. It's like part of the pop psychology culture. Thinking about 3 good things in the evening, you can think about 3 good things that happened that day. And it's such a nice thing to do. But again, digging into it a bit deeper, this exercise, if done for too long, can almost become like a chore. And then it loses its power and it loses its value. So although for some people, when you look at 3 good things, think about 3 good things that happened that day, you know, it can boost well-being because you're focusing on the good things. But again, you can go into this in a bit more depth, and that's why gratitude within the community can also be, you know, enhanced in so many ways, but starting with the individual. So rather than before you get to the community part and doing community initiatives, starting yourself. So the way that you can go into more depth in that, rather than 3 good things, just writing them down, then you spend time reflecting on what was your part to play in those 3 good things. So if one of the good things that you found for the day was, you know, thinking off the top of my head here, you had a really delicious lunch, you know, and you're grateful for the food that you have and the position to be able to earn money to buy, and that's a very simplistic value, but it still means something. But it's then, well, what was your part? Well, your part was that you went to work that day and you did some really lovely things with the children and you tried really hard, you did your job to the best of your capacity. So you think about yourself in that terms, and it just kind of brings the lens of gratitude turned to yourself also, because again, that's something we look outwardly. What can we do for the children? What are we grateful for? We teach them about it, but it also starts with you giving yourself kudos for, you know, the things that you do, and not in an egoistic way, but the gratitude and the gratefulness for being and your place in the world. So again, I feel like that's something, especially within education, because it's such an altruistic career and it's something that you give of yourself so much, but it's also really turning that towards yourself at times, making space for that. So definitely gratitude is a way to enhance your own well-being. And of course, everyone listening here or watching back or what, you know, however you come across this, you will already have thought about how gratitude is already prevalent in your community and different ways that you can introduce it as a connector thing between parents, staff and children. You know, you'll have so many ideas and ways to introduce gratitude. But before any of that, start with yourself and really, really make a point of thinking, how can I use this positive psychology concept for myself? Creative well-being is another one. I think I talked about this last time as well. It's a kind of term that I coined a couple of years ago within a set of cards that I made. Don't have any here to show you, but the idea for me was within education, we talk so much for the children about we want them to be creative, we want them to be innovative. Teachers and staff, educational staff, are expected to be creative and innovative, but very rarely do we have space in terms of explicit space for that. Often in education, when there's art lessons, but there's core subjects that need to get finished, they come first, and art falls off the end of the timetable sometimes, you know. And unfortunately, that is what happens. You know, I hear people talking about it. It's not ideal. It's not what we want to do, but there's a lot of clutter and so many things that we need to teach the children in terms of curriculum coverage. And teachers are the most creative people, and educational staff and counsellors are the most creative people, because you find ways to fit things into that time. So creative wellbeing for me made complete sense, because I thought, well, what better way to sit and teach children about the things we want them to know, whether it's emotional literacy, whether it's about their strengths, growth mindset, whether it's actually teaching them explicitly about how to be well physically, you know, just whatever it might be. We can do that in a creative way. So it almost gives them space to make their own ideas heard. You know, if you think about, well, what would make this better for you? If you find it difficult to access something specific, or if you're struggling with something, or you really enjoy something, how can that be improved? Use our creativity, come up with the ideas. So it's almost connecting well-being hand in hand. But again, think about yourself. And do you know, I'd actually really love if anybody wants to share within the chat, press number 1 if you feel like you do make time for creative aspects within your life, whether that's you're part of a choir, you write songs, you do role play, you go to drama club, you do art, or however you define creativity for yourself. If you do make space for that, press number 1 in the chat. And if you don't feel like you do enough, maybe press number 2. So I'm going to put mine in there as well. I'd probably say I'm at 2 just now. Nice.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, it's great to see. Nice seeing some number 1s. So that's lovely to see that you make time for creativity within your life, because of course we know a lot about art therapy, and there are research papers about the benefits of creativity and the power of creativity. But again, thinking about that for yourself, and is there a way that you can use your creativity, whatever way that might be, however you enjoy. Yes, look at all these ones. So think about how you can incorporate your well-being time into that, or that might be something that you already do to support your wellness, but it's thinking about, is that something that I can enhance for myself? Is it something that I can enhance for the children? Is it a way that I can actually combat these 2 really important things that aren't as prevalent as I would like them to be within the department, or whatever, however it looks? So that's another thing to think about. And again, mindfulness and meditation. So like I was saying before, there's sometimes a tendency for mindfulness and the power of it to be diluted, and it can become like a McMindfulness, where it's just misunderstood and there's misconceptions around what it might be, and the power of it might get lost. So again, it's something, before we teach any children, before we include it in any programs, it must be experienced for yourself and practiced, like we practice drawing or practice creative writing, whatever it is. You have to practice at things. So it doesn't suit everyone, and it's not one size fits all, and that's something we have to be very mindful of, again, when introducing it into schools, because it doesn't work for everyone, you know, and some people really struggle to have a consistent practice, or the misconceptions make them feel like they're just not doing it right, you know, which, you know, you've got to go through all the stages before. And even the most long-term mindfulness practitioners or people that have meditated for 30 years still have a variety of experiences within their practice. It's never a goal, an end point to get to. So when we think about our own well-being, of course, mindfulness and meditation is a great place to start. And it's definitely something connected to the other areas. If you're living a mindfully aware way day to day, you will then notice within yourself the character strengths that you're using, and you will notice them in other people. You will also begin to really notice your emotions and feelings. Without that daily check-in, you'll notice them when they arise rather than making a conscious effort to notice. So when you think about mindfulness and meditation, there is a connection in terms of all the different areas that I've listed here. But again, if you're thinking about your own well-being, it's definitely a practice that you can integrate. And I know how busy people are within education. So even if it becomes something like a 3-minute breathing space on your phone, and it's recorded, and you go into your cupboard when the children are out to play or whatever it is, or whatever you're doing, close the door, headphones in, that 3 minutes, you know. And I know there's like fire safety and all these things, but you know what I mean, just carving out that time for yourself where you just breathe for 3 minutes. That is mindfulness practice, and scientifically that's enough to affect your regulatory system, you know, like your parasympathetic nervous system, and it can reduce cortisol within your brain, which is the stress hormone. So there's just even really simple practices that you can do to begin incorporating mindfulness into your professional life. And it's something that I would really say benefited me a lot when I was working in the classroom, was this mindful awareness of myself. And even during like times that, you know, pinch points throughout the year, and we all know what they are, but it's sometimes bringing yourself back down and reducing stress, and also noticing the really lovely moments that you want to savor. That's what mindfulness can really support us to do as well, which is nice. Just mindful of the time here. So positive psychology and education. I don't know how many people here have already got a wellbeing curriculum as such in school. I know that there are the moral and cultural curriculum within primary. I'm not so in secondary, I think it's similar. But again, some schools will take an off-the-shelf model or a framework and adapt it to their context. Some people create bespoke positive psychology curriculum. But for me, positive psychology and education is just kind of a bit of a no-brainer. And it is partly because it's something that I really love, but I just feel like it is so encompassing of everyone within the community, which is what has been missing at different points in education. So there are opportunities for a bespoke framework. If you think about positive psychology and you learn a little bit about some of the concepts which I talked about before, there was gratitude, growth mindset, different things. There are various interventions connected to positive psychology. And you can look within your school, whether you measure different things, whether you use the PASS survey, emotional recording app like Yoo-Hoo, something like that. There's data there that you can work with. And you can do this for specific groups within the school. You can do it within year groups, different departments, and really find out what's happening in there, whether it be emotionally, or again, like I said, when thinking about the PASS survey from GL, I know that schools have their own things. But again, looking at that data, there's an opportunity for a bespoke framework. So you can think about, well, what do we need to have in our school? What are we going to put on our strategy? What is the most important for our community? And again, thinking about cultural adaptations. And of course, this is the Inclusion Network, and thinking about how inclusion and SEN are catered for within the school, within this framework. Another thing I think about positive psychology and education, it does have everyone considered on the mental health continuum. So you think about people within staff, also parents and students that are on the lower end of the mental health continuum in terms of the disorder and illness. And then we have languishing, but obviously we're going to the optimal, at the far end, it's the optimal functioning and flourishing. But when you've got positive psychology concepts within education, you're catering for everyone on the continuum, because there are things like we talked about before, when things are going wrong and there's disorders and dis-ease, It can be supported by professionals and outside agencies. But again, within the school, sometimes there are children who just need support to understand what emotions are, and that can be accessed within school. And everyone is on the mental health continuum. So again, positive psychology seems inclusive of all people within the community if delivered effectively. And also when you think about community well-being, so like we talked about before, if you have one kind of positive psychology initiative that you choose to focus on, for example, character strengths, that can be something that contributes to community well-being. So we talked before about the individual, and one of the phrases that's most connected to positive psychology is by the late Christopher Peterson, who was one of the professors that actually was involved in the Character Strength Project. When talking about positive psychology, he said, other people matter. And it's just so simple, but it's like, of course, you care for your own well-being. We're all on this journey and we want to flourish. But again, if you think about that in the wider context, the connections, belonging within a community, and if everyone starts to look for their individual well-being, then the community well-being grows. You know, you think about character strength, again, I keep going back to that as an example, but each child in year 4 can tell you what their top character strength is. Each child in year 4 can then spot strengths in their friends. Then that filters into the parents within home environments, there's strength-based parenting going on. And then you think about the school. So the teacher can speak to the parents about the child's strength. The child can speak to the teacher and parents about strengths, and it's a language that everyone understands. And think about the impact on well-being overall. So it's a really lovely thing about positive psychology.
Was he, Ashley, was he the guy who coined the phrase about the oxygen mask from the, I was trying to remember, was that the guy where if you're on the airplane, you have to tend to yourself first, you fix your own oxygen mask first?
Yeah, I have heard that. I don't know if it was him, it could have been. I've heard that before. It might have been John Kabat-Zinn, who was in mindfulness. He was like one of the kind of front runners in mindfulness within the West. But he also talked about like something to do with the waves and surfing, and he made a really nice comment about that as well. So he might have said the thing about the mask as well, but it makes total sense. You know, you can't help someone else until you're fine, you're pouring into your own cup, however way you want to say it, but it's like you help others after you spend time for yourself. You know? Yeah. So thanks for that. It's actually a really important point with what we're talking about. And the other thing I wanted to kind of mention about positive psychology as well, it's like a box of chocolates kind of springs to mind for me. So if you think about your favorite box of chocolates, I always go for an orange cream. It's like the first one that I'll choose because that's what works for me. And I like to think positive psychology in that way. So you offer positive psychology, knowledge, learning, interventions, training to a school community, staff, students, parents, everyone involved. It doesn't mean to say that then every child must practice mindfulness at 8 o'clock till 8:10 on a Wednesday morning. But what it means is they've tried it and it might be something they continue to go back to. So again, you think about as a school or community overall, it gives people free choice. So the learning is there. You can do blocks of time. You can teach it however works in your context. With the support of outside agencies, sometimes it's more difficult to grow from the inside out, you know, and the advice is out there, the support is out there, the communities are out there to share best practice. Here's a perfect example of where we are today. And once the children and the staff and everyone have got the knowledge and been introduced to these concepts, the real goal then is individuals being able to choose personally what works for them to support their own subjective well-being, whether that be the head teacher, whether it be a parent, a child, whoever, but they've been given the box of chocolates and they can choose which ones works for them. And again, we all know the importance of belonging. And again, positive psychology, there's lots to talk about in sense of belonging and the connections to others within a small community, which could be a group within one department, it can be a class of children, a staff, whatever it might be, but thinking about ways to improve this sense of belonging overall, and many interventions within positive psychology can support that. And again, the strengths, the shift in focus, we all know, well, I know personally for myself how often I can hear the voice sometimes like, oh, you didn't do that fast enough, or you're rushing through this, or whatever it is, you know, you hear that voice like telling you. And we are wired to be that way scientifically, neurologically, we're wired with this negativity bias. And it's always been to protect ourselves and, you know, run away from a tiger back in the day, if that's what was in front of you. You're wired to be aware of things that can go wrong. But again, like positive psychology, we talked about the strengths, character strengths, but if focusing on that can make a total shift. So if we encourage children to say, again, with growth mindset, or even ourselves, I find timekeeping difficult, but one of my strengths is, I keep going back to leadership, or I find timekeeping difficult, but one of my strengths is love of learning. So my top strength is love of learning. I'm going to tomorrow learn 3 ways about keeping time, whatever it might be, you know, so you can adapt your strengths, make a shift in focus. So it's not what's wrong, it's like, what can we do to help ourselves flourish even further? So positive psychology is a good thing for that, because obviously the whole crux of it is to flourish in life. And again, we think about the whole child. Schools, teachers, staff, parents, everyone, we're all focused on the whole child and all the parts that make that child up and how we can support them best. But again, positive psychology is just another facet for that, that can be part of the puzzle overall to support them. Why? Now, I've only included a tiny amount of data on here, but I know that everyone listening or watching, everyone that's here within your context, of course there are struggles, and there's no getting away from that. You know, I know that there are departments that are overrun. There is funding needed for different elements of inclusion and well-being within school. There's just so many different things that are part of it, that are part of this element of education that we're always trying to improve and make the best opportunity for the children and staff and the parents that work there. But there's no getting away from the hard black and white facts of mental health and globally, particularly after the pandemic. Mostly in education, what we've seen is, up until most recently, is a current model of correction and cure. So it's finding what's wrong, finding a solution for it, which of course has its place and it's hugely important. But again, it detaches some of the other stakeholders within the community. There is now a shift happening towards preventative and inclusion of all, like we talked about. So preventative measures, it's not waiting for someone to experience ill health, or it's not waiting for something to be diagnosed, for example, but it's again having a preventative way in terms of, here are things that are scientifically, they're evidence-based rather than evidence-informed. We can do evidence-based that can be supportive of well-being. Mindfulness is one of them. Gratitude interventions are another. Here they are to try. They might work for you, they might not. So it's having that preventative kind of outlook also. Some of the rising statistics, and I came across too many of these when I was researching for this, but one of them, for example, pre-pandemic in Australia, 2016, 1 in 7 children and adolescents experienced a mental health disorder, namely anxiety and depression. And I'm thinking, that's only the children statistically that have been captured, you know, and whatever the study, I can send a link on that I found, but I just think, you know, that's a huge amount. And when you think about globally and different minority groups and different cultures, different aspects of being human, there will be statistics like this accessible for each country. One of the biggest ones was the World Health Organization that talked about globally how this is an ongoing pandemic, the rise in depression and anxiety in young people. Now, I know that counsellors are finding this within schools now. The different outside agencies that are bursting at the seams, you know, with going in to visit students that also have staff not just within education, with all industries that are now starting to seek out mental health provision. But again, if you think about those statistics and what's happening now, okay, so what if we then start to build these preventative models to almost prevent this pandemic that we've talked about from WHO growing even more, you know? So again, another one in England, NHS commissioned study talked about the increase in prevalence of mental health disorders between 5 and 19-year-olds, and it changed from 1 to 8 to 1 in 6 in 2021. So you think about, again, just imagine in your context, how many students are in your school, how many staff. It's big, you know, and it's something that, again, teachers and educators and counsellors and everyone, all the stakeholders are desperate to try and improve. But again, we've got to, like we're doing today, meet with each other, talk with each other, share best practice, because it is something that's, to me, you know, it is worrying. And when you read about the statistics, it's like, okay, so what now? What's the solution? Where are we going next?
That really puts it into context, Ashley, when you think that you're sitting in front of a class of maybe 20, sometimes 30 kids, at least 2 to 4 of them will have some sort of condition that is making their life more difficult. It really puts it into context. That's huge.
No, it really is. And for me, another part of it as well, we've got to also be really aware of how well-being can be harmful, in the sense that if it's not put in a strategy correctly and, you know, adapted to the school's context, things that we think would be enjoyable or beneficial for some children can actually be shown to harm their overall subjective well-being. So, for example, some children and students, have done it myself, use positive affirmations, but for some children that doesn't work. It makes them feel worse because they think, but I'm not this thing and someone's asking me to say it. So we also know about the culture of toxic positivity as well, you know, and we have things like World Happiness Day and we all have great fun, but again, there's this aspect of it that if a child, like you said, in the class, there could be 2 or 3 of them sitting there thinking, I don't feel that, I don't feel this happiness, and dancing just now in the classroom isn't going to make me feel like that, so what's wrong with me? So I know within our context we're aware, but again, this is something that I suppose needs to be threaded throughout daily, all stakeholders, you know, sharing this knowledge and knowing about that. So we've only got a short time left. I'm just going to really briefly whiz through, and again, these are some of the things that I've just kind of talked about. But for within the Free Spirit Collective, that is part of the core is of our values and everything, is making things accessible for the community. So again, there are lots of free community events, and so many wellbeing centres across Dubai offer free services. So it's making sure that we share those between our networks to make sure that everyone is aware of what's out there, because we know what the system is like in terms of insurance. We've got a different model here than other countries in the world where there's free healthcare paid for by tax, different things. But again, it's making sure that as a network, we share what's out there and what's available for free for access in communities. And again, like we talked about, our company very much like schools are thinking about the whole person and their whole system. And every service that we offer, we think about the holistic point of that and the holistic parts of everyone. So I don't want to talk too much about the company because I'm aware of what the rules were before.
No, that's okay. That's okay, because what you're doing is really good and it's really needed.
Yeah, it is. And if you don't mind, I will just whiz through about some of the things that we offer. Again,
Take
like
your
I said,
time.
can support. So these are our core values. And again, all the schools have got core values and visions and mission statements, but we want to do that also for our company. Talks about service, love, surrender, community, creativity, and also clinical excellence. So it's something that we've talked about throughout this talk. You'll see the words pop up like creativity. We've talked about that. Service, being given to other people. There's connections between all of it, you know. In a centre like ours, I suppose for me, one of the most important things is love. It all comes from a place of passion and support and care, you know, as humans. And I think the mental health and wellbeing provision, especially of children, is just so important. You know, I always think back to the Whitney Houston song, like, children are our future, but they really are, you know, and like what we need to continue to improve in this world for them. And it's up to us then to adapt the support and make sure that we're giving them the very best that we can. In terms
You
of
want to try singing a few bars of it?
Not right now, but maybe on a Friday night. So I could love to share this, some of the things that we can offer schools, if that's all right, Catherine. I'll just
yeah, of course.
Thank you. Mindmasters is something that we came up. Now, this was with the idea because many counsellors that I've spoken with have alluded to the fact that they struggle to get round all of the classes. First of all, they can't go in and do, you know, if they've got presentations or talks that they want to speak with all the children, they find that hard because their caseload is so heavy, and it's with children that are in crisis or they're really needing more support than others, you know, so they're finding it difficult to get through to all of the children. So again, they share things with staff. Staff are then trying to fit that into curriculum time. So there's this imbalance at the minute. And one of the things that we thought within the clinicians within the centre, and two of us are teachers, now wellbeing coaches, former teachers, was supporting schools in the way of Mindmasters. So again, it's that bespoke service where teachers or SEN departments, inclusion departments, counsellors, and the parents all work alongside and say, this little group of children would benefit from more social and emotional learning. So that's where myself and Dom could come into a school, and obviously we would do the child protection, you know, within the school if that was required. And we're going to do our own certificates soon anyway, so that we can present that. But it would be able to then, within the school day, very much like speech and language therapy, OT, different outside agencies that come in, we would want to be there to support so that other groups can have that time with someone if they're not managing, because the counsellor's caseload or inclusion department's caseload is so overrun, they can't get around to specific children for certain reasons. Oops. Wellbeing author visits, that's just something I think I've shared before about my children's books, Emobeings and the Feelings, which was written purely for that emotional literacy. So when you think about provision within all the departments in your school, when you reflect on it, emotional literacy is there. It's already such a huge part, but it's thinking about other ways to kind of enhance this and really push it to the forefront, because it is at the crux of everything. So one of my children's books is about that, Emobeings and Feelings, and the other one's about character strength. So we can come in and talk to the children about these themes, because sometimes an assembly makes it a bit heightened. So we can do that for the children and staff also. Like I talked about, creative wellbeing sessions, but this is something I would also be happy to work as a staff with, to talk about what creative wellbeing is and how you can adapt that within your environment. We could work together to, you know, take your plans, take your objectives, pull them together and find a way to cover more within the short time that we've got. Same with character strengths. Again, this is something that I could do a talk about this on its own, but to me, this is a lovely, lovely place to start for schools. If you're looking to incorporate positive psychology, research-informed interventions for staff wellbeing, for student wellbeing and parent wellbeing, character strengths is a lovely place to start. It's just, there's so much research out there, and you can access it all on the website viacharacter.org. But again, that's something that I can help with, because it's something I've really kind of specialised in for a while. There's Dom runs an 8-week mindfulness program for staff, and he's talked about how effective this has been for staff and teacher wellbeing. So what's really nice about it is, again, it's clearing up those misconceptions. And what we find is the teachers that, or the, sorry, I keep saying teachers, but what I mean is everyone, all the adults that work within education, within the context, once they go through a course, this one, they find it easier then to adapt the practice for the children and introduce it effectively. So again, it's just another program that would be useful. This is the one that's closest to my heart is a free wellbeing curriculum that I've written for schools, primary schools. There are costs in terms of the training, but what we've tried to do is keep it as small as possible, obviously, because this wellbeing curriculum is all rooted in positive psychology. And at the moment it's a framework, but we're hoping in future to be able to take school data and then create modules that are for that context, because every school is different, the same as every child is different. So it's finding what works for that context, but we have to start somewhere. This curriculum has got 6 modules like the ones I talked about before: gratitude, mindfulness, resilience, coping, these things. So if that's something that anybody would like to learn more about, then I'd be happy to chat with you about it a bit more. Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. It'll be online. This is something that school counsellors might find interesting about staff training for psychological first aid. Some of you might have already done mental health first aid courses within schools, but again, this is very similar. It's just, you can do, it's like a day's training, 6 hours, and it can be within the leadership team that can then be filtered down within all the departments, or it can be a whole staff. But again, when we talk about the things that can go wrong, this is really helpful within a staff environment to look for those signals, like look for those signs that you see in another. And sometimes we're all caught up in doing so many busy things. You might not spot the signs within yourself, and you might not spot them within others. And of course, we want to be there for each other. But again, this is just something that talks about some of these things and how we can support each other. And again, we've got all the community services that typically you would expect in a wellbeing clinic. We've got psychiatrists, clinicians, psychotherapists, coaches. There's a child psychologist there, holistic tuition. We've got yoga, all these different things. We really want to support schools with. So I'm trying to get to the end where my other slide is. Yeah, so if there's any information that you want to know more about any of these things, these are the email addresses. And thanks so much for letting me share that. I think, because I know there's quite a lot to get through there, but I hope that was useful. So thank you.
That was, as always, really, really good, Ashley. And it's so important to talk about all of these things, because like I know you kept saying it's there. Most schools have a well-being policy and they might have some activities and things, but do we really take time to reflect and really implement it in a way that is useful and meaningful? And I think a lot of teachers would say no. So I think having an external person come in gives that. It's like, as school leaders, I could go to a campus, our own campuses, every day and harp on the same stuff, and people just stop listening. But when you get somebody who's so passionate about it and who really knows what they're talking about, that can make people really sit back and think, okay, yeah, I need to readjust, I need to reset, not just for the students, for themselves. So it's been really, really informative. I managed to find the link to your last video. I found it on our YouTube. So I was surprised at my own efficiency there. So I put the links for the YouTube channel and for your video. It's there, and I'll have the new link for this one either tomorrow or the day after when I get around to editing. And thank you so much. There are no questions in the chat, so I think we're all good as far as I can see. No, just
no, I think
for the recording.
It's fine. Thank you, Ashley. I'm so glad that you did this session. I would actually love to invite you again for the LSA forum, because we do have another forum that's mainly focused on LSAs, and I think it's just as important for them to realize that, mental health is something that everybody needs to take care of. So maybe, Catherine, we can arrange for Ashley to come and push her for another session with the ladies from the other group. We do that on a Tuesday. So if you can maybe organize a day, because I really enjoyed it, and I think it will be really, really good for them to listen to this as well.
Lovely, thank you. I'd love to do that, of course, anytime.
Oh, that would be awesome. And we had more than 50 people joined us today. And our LSA forum, we often get 300-400 LSAs to come join on that, because there's so so few options for them in terms of something that's free and accessible, because it's difficult for them to be paying huge amounts of money to do training. So we get a lot of LSAs. So if any of our SENCOs here today, or heads of inclusion principals, please do let your LSAs know. That's on tomorrow, and you can follow our LinkedIn to find the links to that. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll have Ashley join for our LSA forum as well. It would be brilliant. Yeah. Thank you everyone so much. Have a lovely afternoon and a great week ahead, and a great month for October. I believe we have many celebration days this month. We've got International Teachers Day, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There's lots going on. So have a lovely month.
Kate, is Celebrating Yourself Day.
Is it? Or is that every day?
That's every day. After listening to Ashley, that's going to be every day.
Yay, good.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to take home the think of 3 good things. Definitely, for sure. Because that's an easy hit. It's an easy hit.
Well, this is my number 1 already. Being here with you all today. That's definitely one of the good things about my day. So thanks so much.
Okay,
all right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Ma salama. Bye.